in the United States who are representing the countries of Turkey, Israel, Russia, Germany, and the United States. And so I think we have on our Skype, our Google Hangout, all the participants present and accounted for. I think we begin with some introductions.
Yeah.
So why don't we begin?
So here we go. Sait, you want to start?
Yeah.
Welcome, Sait. Please introduce yourself.
Okay. Hello, my name is Sait Tuzel. I am a visiting scholar at Panelists School of Communication and Media and Media Education Lab. I am from Turkey. I am assistant professor in Turkey Education Faculty member. Okay.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
Carla,
Carla?
please
Hi,
introduce yourself.
hi everybody. Hi everybody. I'm a visiting scholar here at URI, but I'm a teacher. I teach linguistics in Brazil at the Federal University of Minas Gerais, and I work mainly with reading online, and I'm trying to understand how the kids read online, what difficulties they have, and what can we help them in school to be better readers.
Silke?
Next we have Silke Grafe from Germany.
Good morning from Germany. My name is Silke Grafe and I'm a professor of education at the University of Würzburg in Bavaria, Germany. My research interest is media education and digital literacy in an international perspective, so I'm very happy to be part of this panel and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thanks for coming this morning.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Friesem. I'm a PhD student at the University of Rhode Island, originally coming from Israel to do my PhD, and I'm the assistant director of the Media Education Lab.
My name is Renee Hobbs. I'm director of the Harrington School of Communication and Media at the University of Rhode Island. And my research lab, Media Education Lab, aims to improve media literacy education through scholarship and community service. Today we have 3 scholars from education and 3 scholars from communication who are looking at the concept of digital literacy in relation to the developmental needs of children and youth. In terms of the structure of our session, what we thought we would like to do is very quickly define digital literacy, because we believe that is a big problem and we want to problematize that right at the get-go. So step 1, let's problematize the concept. Step 2, we want to share with you a little bit about our conversations in trying to do cross-cultural, looking at cross-cultural dimensions of digital and media literacy, and especially in relation to what kinds of insights can we learn by explicitly looking across 6 different cultural contexts. So what can we discover looking across 6 cultural contexts? And we're going to do that for a little bit. We've identified 5 themes that we think are insightful as we look across those 5 cultural contexts. We want to share those 5 themes with you and talk with you about our discoveries. And then we want to have time for discussion and questions and your insights on cross-cultural perspectives about digital literacy. So that's the structure of our session, and that means we're going to go really, really quick.
So we identify kind of one competency that each one of us would think that would be the most important, which was very difficult for each country. And you can see the slides here, but since we're like very narrow on time, we're going to go fast forward to the goals of this presentation. And we have 4 main goals to share with you. So we want to discuss the implementation of digital and media technologies in different countries, outline the gaps and challenges of technology implementation, consider the relationship between professional development of teachers, higher education, and research, and explore benefits of intercultural exchange for stimulating innovation in digital and media literacy education. So we're going to start with Brazil, an introduction for each one of the countries and the setup. So, Carla, you want to start?
Okay, sure. Brazil is a very large country and with a very diverse socio-economic context, and differences are very big there. We have 50 million students in 2012, and school in Brazil is compulsory from the first year to the 9th grade. So from 6 to 15 years old, the students should be at school. 90% of our students go to public schools, and they go to regular school until 14 years old. But many, actually half of our students, 50%, just don't go to high school. So we have a lot of illiterate people in Brazil. We still have to work a lot on that. And we have many challenges and gaps to fill. And one of them is, I'm not going to talk about the social and economical problems we face that everybody knows, but focus on education and focus on media literacy and on public schools. So usually what we have in the educational context is a very traditional approach of education, very teacher-centered, very content-based. Students have to know a lot of things by heart. They don't know what they are learning and why they are learning that. And we have very few interdisciplinary projects. So we need more research on what and how to use technology and how to make a more significant school for the students. And we need to work more with our teachers in order to give them more feedback from research and help them to implement media literacy in schools. And we also have to focus more on media literacy and digital literacy information courses, because many teachers just don't know what to do in classroom, and they go to formation courses and they really don't learn much about it. So this is something that we really need to work on. Digital technology is contemplated at our what we call PCN, that is the National Curricular Parameter. That's the parameters that is just like the Common Core here in the States. And so the government tells us that we have to use computers, we have to help students to be literate in digital literacy as well. And the government gives a lot of computers to schools. So most of our schools have computer labs. This doesn't mean that they work well, but they have the computers and connected to the internet. And the government is making a pilot to give the students laptops. So each student is going to have his own laptop. So this is still in a pilot project, but I hope it works, and I hope that soon our students will have internet and little laptops that they can take home and use a lot and develop digital literacy.
Thank you.
I think that's it.
Okay. Silke?
Okay. I would like as well to introduce briefly the situation of the German school system, secondly, the state of the technology integration, and finally, current challenges and gaps. I collected some statistics, which you can see at the top of the slide, to make the comparison of the 6 different countries easier. We have almost 35,000 schools in our 16 states in Germany, and more than 650,000 teachers teach 11 million students in grades K-12. And the German school system is decentralized, as the federal states are responsible for school policy. We have a compulsory school system, and more than 85% of the German schools are public schools. And with regard to technology integration in German schools, one has to assume an underachievement. Due to the rapid developments in the fields of computer and internet, the use of computer-based media education in educational institutions has been thoughtfully regarded by German educational policy and funds since the 1990s. Initially and unfortunately, funds were basically used for technical equipment. Furthermore, there was a lack of corresponding innovation and implementation strategies. But as time went by, the importance of teacher training and of the development of concepts and research was realized. The computer-student ratio at school is still only slowly increasing, and the frequency of computer use at school is below the OECD average. So one of the challenges in Germany is that it can still not be spoken of a comprehensive integration of digital media in the classroom. There is a considerable difference in the frequency between informal learning with digital media at home and formal learning with digital media in school. So the results of the PISA study have led to a shift of interest from digital literacy to different fields. However, that fact that there is a relationship between these subjects and media issues is often ignored. Against this background, one has to state that questions dealing with the use of computer and media, as well as media literacy education, are not fundamental subject of education policy any longer. And another challenge is that there's no curriculum at the national level. However, in 2012, the Standing Conference of the Ministers of Education passed new recommendations for media education in school in 2012. So for media education along the lifespan, we need a more coherent approach between different education institutions for media education along the lifespan. This would enable the German activities with regard to the conceptual work and the approaches to integrate media in education to reach their full potential.
Thank you.
All right, the situation in Russia. Russian school system is centralized. There is a Ministry of Education and Science that decides on budget and funding. Schools in Russia are mostly public, and fairly recently standardized tests were introduced as a stage between different levels of schooling. But there are 4 tests in the United States, so usually children take tests in the end of school before they enter college or university, and that's it. Technology integration. So Russia wants to have a lot of technology integration in schools, but unfortunately it remains largely unideal. Schools that have an opportunity to introduce technology into their classrooms, they actually can do great things. And there is this program that's called One Computing and Laptop program that supposedly children each one has a computer and they are able to do all their assignments on their computer and their other supplementary technological devices that help them communicate with teachers and teachers to communicate with parents, creating a so-called e-learning environment where students are able to not only submit an assignment, but also check their own progress, test themselves in the process. And it looks like the limited research that we have shows that when all these factors are in place, actually the system works great. Fortunately, it doesn't happen all the time because there is a huge technological divide. And I'll talk. Technological integration in Russian schools is that, first of all, the technology available only in some schools. Well, most of schools have some form of technology, but sometimes it's just in teachers' lounge or in the computer lounge where people are children are supposed to learn to use computers. They are not using this technology to in other classes. They just learn they don't learn really about technology. They don't learn about media. Then once distributed, there is no guarantee that technology will be properly used because teachers are not trained enough. And well, this is a problem that you can see in that we have in any country. Yes, we have great ideas, great theories of how technology will be implemented, but when it's brought into schools, teachers don't know how to deal with it, and they have time constraints, they have traditional approaches, so this gets stuck at this level. Also, we have very limited research about technology implementation in Russian schools, partially because of the situation in social sciences in Russia. So I have some data from European and American researchers, and we'll talk about it a little bit more later.
Sait?
Okay. Turkey, I think Turkey is a very small country to Brazilian compared to the Brazilian and Russian. Turkey surface area is roughly size of Texas.
Texas?
And, yeah, Texas. Our population is about 73 million, and half of the generation is under the 20, I think very young generation, and 18 million K-12 students, 800,000 teachers, and 67,000 schools in the educational system. I think this number is huge, and our country's student population is bigger than a lot of country in the world. And the school system is mostly public, and only 2% of schools are private. We use the centralized education system. This means all the students, teachers, and school is consisting into one building, where in the capital of city, and all the school use one curriculum that developed by center. And K-12 education is compulsory. I talk about the very big digital technology project in Turkey. In 2011, the government introduced the project called Fatih project. The government putting the tablet computers in the hands of every student's grade 5 to 20, and interactive whiteboards and fast internet access in every classroom. Very, very huge digital transformation projects. Firstly, teachers, students, and parents' reaction were positive at first, but after the first implementation to the project, there was, I think, a chaos. Their students felt empowered and engaged for perhaps the first time in their lives in the classroom. On the other hand, the teachers felt powerless and completely unprepared to teach in digital classroom and digital media. As part of my research, I interviewed the 18 teachers who were part of the Fatih project, and I recorded the negative and positive opinions about the project. The bulk of the opinions were negative. Out of teachers thinking the Fatih project is only political movement, because a lot of teachers, because the timing of the announcements of one tablet per child in 2 months before the election of the Prime Minister, and teachers need ICT skills and digital pedagogy knowledge. Teachers said that I can't use the tablet and smart board. Also, I don't know digital pedagogy. And a lot of teachers need a new curriculum because our curriculum is old and not support to the digital and media technology and device. And I need a lot of we need a lot of content, digital content, because we use the only device, but we haven't got a content of ICT and other things. Students' background and very big digital divide between the students, because east part and west part very different and very huge differences. And hacking, some students hacking the tablet computer, and they can easily access the harmful content in digital world. And other thing, this good opinion about the project is very small. The project is very good opportunity for the bridge to students' life and school life. And teacher can be used not only paper-based text but also multimodal text. And the tablet is very good effect of students' motivation and very good opportunity for the catch up with era. It's okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So Israel is the tiniest country here that we're going to talk about. So we're only 8 million people, and only 9 school districts, huge school district, but still only 9 if you consider that. But if you look, we have 4,400 schools. It's approximately $10.4 billion being invested in the school. An average of $7,750 per student, when the private investment in students are getting all like $1,000 per students. We have 1.5 million students. It's wrong there. There's 800,000 teachers in Israel. It's centralized. It's compulsory from pre-K till 12th grade. So through the whole educational system, you need to be in school. There is formal, semi-formal, and private school, but mainly it's a formal school system. The problem with Israel, such a tiny state country, but the educational system is divided into this 5 strands. So everything is centralized, but depending on which strand you are. So there is the secular, but there is also the Arab, Jewish, Druze streams that are more religious, and there is also the technological, that was the training track that became, and I'm going to talk about it in a second, more the technologic kind of and digital implementation. Israel is working a lot. The biggest exportation is the high-tech industry, so it's called the startup nation. And you can see that 96% of the children are connected to the internet by mobile devices or at home. There is a science and technology administration that puts a lot of money in incubator kind of project to have people to develop their ideas. In the educational system, there is the experiment and project division that promotes those initiatives in the schools themselves. And we have 9 universities and 22 teachers' colleges. Each one of them has a tech kind of department to do professional development, but also to teach pre-service teachers. And there is a Center for Educational Technology that is implementing their technological implementation into the school system. So the challenges are the politicization of education. So as you see, it's very Israeli, very polarized, area of conflict, so everything is political, and every 4 years the Ministry of Education changes, and so the policy changes. So teacher is kind of beginning to look kind of, oh, we don't care about what, because in 4 years it's going to change. So there is some kind of disappointment and not engaging with current policies. The teacher status is very low. Always it's rated as like the salary is very low comparing to other things in the industry. The budget of education is always negotiable, and it's not clear where all the money, because it's a lot of money that is invested, but don't always go to the schools themselves. There's initiative and other things. There's a big digital divide between the periphery and the center, and that causes a lot of gaps, and also the different strands of the education.
Great. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the U.S. school system. Many of you are familiar with it. We have, how many? 315 million citizens in the United States, and 13,000 school districts in 50 states. We spend about $607 billion a year on education. We spend an average of about $13,000 per pupil. And most of that funding comes from local funding, because local control of schools is a part of the American ecosystem, and it's very distinctive from the other nations which use a more centralized approach to education. So there's about 54 million students in grades K through 12. That's down substantially from just 10 years ago when it was 75 million students. So we're seeing, as the baby boomers' children graduate from high school, the K-12 population is on a slide, a downward slide. And of course, then that will influence us in higher education, as you well know. So there's about 3.2 million teachers in K-12. It's high. The characteristics of the American education system are high levels of decentralization, with curriculum being determined at the most local level. Even the Common Core State Standards Initiative, which has attempted to provide some centralizing function for the 50 states, is struggling with the our historic focus on local control of schools. We do have three systems: the public system, the charter school movement, which is an alternative public school model, and then we of course have private education in the form of religious schools and independent schools. The challenges are. Do I have a challenges sheet? I don't have it. I guess we're going to introduce some of the challenges as we do the cross-national exploration, looking at the connections between these 6 countries. One of the strategies that we used in moving forward our thinking about this is to lay out for you the way in which the political, economic, and structural features of the education system are shaping digital literacy. It's also the case, but not something we talk about in this panel, that the media systems of these nations also shape the manifestations of digital literacy in practice. And so that we set that aside for now just because our ability to manage complexity is limited. But it's also wise to think about how the media systems that are in these 6 nations will inflect and do inflect the nature of digital literacy. All right, so what are we going to do next? We're going to identify some key ideas.
Yeah. So each one. So the first key ideas.
All right. So the first idea that we used to discuss and compare technology of the 6 countries is the difference between periphery and center and inequalities that stem from this difference. So I'll say a couple of words about Russia. First of all, Russia has a huge difference between center and periphery. It has 2 major centers, economic, cultural, political centers. That's St. Petersburg and Moscow. I'm from St. Petersburg, so I have a bias here, I guess. And there are some big cities scattered around the rest of the country, but still these are the major centers. And when you go away from bigger cities, you basically go 10 years into the past in terms of technology. So there is a huge, of course, difference in not only in schools, but also in other areas of life, being this center and periphery in the use of technology. And teachers have less opportunities to be introduced to more modern approaches of educating students. So this difference, this bigger, broader cultural economic and political difference between center and periphery is reflected in the big, huge divide in terms of technology integration in schools.
Got it. I'll share an example of center-periphery inequalities by describing to you two consulting and research experiences that I've had in the last 3 years. Let's start with St. Mark's School. St. Mark's School is an independent, coeducational, non-secular, non-religious school located in San Rafael, California, just north of San Francisco. It's where the children of Google executives send their kids. 400 children in a K-8 school equipped with the latest technology, and a staff who for the last 10 years has been involved in a series of study groups where they have been learning how to integrate a digital media and information literacy into the K-8 curriculum. So these are teachers who routinely do a unit on issues of representation and gender representation stereotypes in the media, a unit on critically analyzing advertising, a deep dive exploration of news analysis and news media. This is in K-8, right? So we're talking second graders, fourth graders, seventh graders. And a very active focus on kid media production. So kids are making media and authoring in a variety of different media forms and formats. Contrast that to my 3-year engagement with the Russell Byers Charter School in Philadelphia, a charter school aiming to integrate digital and media literacy into the K-8 curriculum, 400 students in actually K-6, 70% on free and reduced lunch, located just a block from the Franklin Institute in downtown Center City, Philadelphia. When we arrived at this school 3 years ago, well, actually now it's four years ago, there were 8 computers in the entire building available to children, and the only time children could use these computers was when they had finished their regular work. The computers were located in the hallway, and if the kid finished their regular work, they could go into the hallway and play games. There was no library in this school. There was no computer lab. So the key ideas that are shaping the future of digital literacy is that digital literacy will have to find ways to address the gap between the center and the periphery. That is the well-resourced and the under-resourced aspects of our community. And we think the 2 examples from Russia and the United States are the starkest, boldest, and most dramatic examples of that work. Next, we turn to the second big idea, that curriculum is primarily created at the national level. So for this, we turn to Sait, looking at Turkey and also at the United States. Sait, can you talk a little bit about this key idea that curriculum is or is not created at the national level? What are the implications of that for integrating digital literacy in Turkey?
Okay, we can use the national curriculum created at the national level. I think our 2 big problems about the curriculum. The first one is our curriculum are not support the media and digital literacy. I said that the Turkey started a very big project about the digital and media literacy. Tablet is hand in every student, but our curriculum doesn't support the use tablet and developing the students' ICT skills. And our second problem about the curriculum is all the media literacy related courses are elective and specific course in Turkey. For example, media literacy courses are only for secondary grade students, but all the children use media device in the primary education years and a lot of experience in the until the secondary grade. And we use the national curriculum, but Turkey east part and west part is very different needs. West parts children are use the media a lot of time and very good ICT skills and very good experience of media and technology, but east part students don't use the media and not a big experience about the media and technology. The same problem is rural schools and city schools are the same problem, but we can use this same curriculum in a different area and different schools.
Got it. So at sometimes, Sait, I have been jealous of Turkey in that media literacy is an elective course available to middle school students in Turkey. But I appreciate your point about how one national curriculum may not be responsive to the differences between students in different regions of the country. That is fascinating. In the U.S., we have quite a different problem because we don't have a national curriculum. However, we do have national standards, and that's an important distinction. We do have national standards that have been developed by teacher groups in science, in math, in English and language arts, in elementary, and so the articulation between standards and curriculum has changed over the last 15 years. Now, because of Common Core state standards, there is a move toward something that is a de facto national curriculum. And of course, corporations and corporate educational multimedia providers like Pearson are eager to step into that place and fill the gap to provide essentially a national curriculum. And we're seeing a lot of investment right now as companies are aiming to do that. However, that stands in contrast to what has traditionally in the 20th century been kind of a proud tradition that K-12 folks borrowed from us in higher education. That is, teacher-created curriculum. For most of the 20th century, teachers were trained to be professionals, to develop their own curriculum, and to develop the curriculum to meet the actual needs of the children in the room. So skillfully adjusting curriculum to meet the learners. Many critics say that there has been some significant erosion of that capability, as younger teachers may lack the skills to do the kind of heavy lifting in creating curriculum. And of course, critics also say that teacher competence then weighs very heavily on our approach, which has led to essentially teacher evaluation initiatives in every state where teachers are now judged by the educational goals their students make, and that is an inadvertent byproduct of our lack of national curriculum. So now we move to the third key idea. That's the idea that higher education and research may or may not play a role in digital and media literacy education. We're going to use the cases of Israel and Turkey. Jonathan?
No, Brazil.
Oh, and Brazil. Thank you.
So Carla. Can you hear us, Carla?
Okay. Higher education. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Higher education in Brazil plays a very. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Carla.
Okay. So higher education in Brazil is very responsible for teacher formation and for research. So a lot of research that's done in this area of media literacy, digital literacy, takes place at the federal public universities in Brazil. And that's exactly where the students learn to be teachers. So while they are at school, at the university, they have a lot of contact with research and findings of research. But as soon as they get out of the university and they start teaching, they don't have much time to study and to keep up with research, and they lose contact with research projects. So we need to, there are some projects that are done, especially with applied teachers, applied linguistic teachers, that are trying to make this connection between the digital world and the schools. And so we have many projects working with the teachers, working with schools, and trying to help them to use technology as a pedagogical device. But this is not always. They work a lot. Sometimes they think that we are spies, that they want to say this connection between the university and the teachers and schools is very difficult. Both this connection and develop and test more material, because we don't have so many materials in Portuguese. To match the research we do at the university, schools, and how to improve and help the students to improve their abilities to work with digital environments. We have one of my...
Thank you for helping us understand the connect.
We call it extension projects. So what we call extension projects are the projects that we use to do at the university that really connects to school and help the school. And so one of the projects I work with is called Redigir. And if you Google Redigir UFMG, you're going to find it. It's in Portuguese, but if you click on the activities, you're going to see a lot of activities that you can understand what we're using the pictures. So we are trying to make this connection between what the research asks us to the school, elementary school and high school.
Thank you for sharing. Next we hear from Sait about the relationship between higher education and research and in digital and media literacy education.
There are two main institutions responsible for education in Turkey. The first one is Minister of Education, and the second one is Higher Education Council. The Minister of Education is responsible for K-12 education and in-service teacher training. And the Higher Education Council is responsible for universities, research, and in-service teacher education. Both of these institutions depend on the government, but both the political perspective are different because Minister of Education committee members selected by government, Higher Education Council committee members selected by President of the Republic. In this reason, generally government more support the Minister of Education, and these institutions usually doesn't achieve a consensus to each other. For example, all the K-12 students use tablet PC and smartboard in the class, but I am in the School of Education, and we have only two, Blackboard and the digital presentation device, because the government doesn't support the higher education. And the major challenge is Turkey is the disconnect between K-12 education and higher education. The research that doing in the university doesn't support the inform the K-12 education and curriculum and the FATI project and etc. The research result doesn't transfer the K-12 education assessment, and the Minister of Education decision about the digital and media literacy education doesn't research based it is generally politic and other reasons.
Thank you for sharing the political context in which the gap between K-12 and higher education exists. It's especially fascinating to imagine how to teach teachers about working in a technology-infused school when you don't have access to that technology in your higher education setting. That does seem quite paradoxical and a fascinating problem that needs to be addressed soon. Okay, next key idea. Professional development is a marginal priority. I guess that's kind of obvious, right? But let's talk about it. In Germany.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is actually the case. I mean, on the one hand, one can assume that every German teacher education program at universities offers, for example, lectures and courses dealing with media issues, especially as teacher training curricula and teacher training examination regulations demand dealing with media issues. And moreover, there are some universities that offer to set a major field of study in the field of media or offer an additional qualification certificate. So there's a lot of things going on, but however, all in all, the present situation shows that the recent activities are still not sufficient to secure that all future teachers acquire the necessary skills for teaching with and about media. And the future will show if the existing activities in the currently ongoing restructuring of teacher training courses can be intensified, but first experiences show that this is not the case. And in addition to the special activities in the field of teacher education, there were and still are extensive initiatives concerning continuing professional teacher education in the different federal states. Thus, practically every federal state has organized continuing teacher education programs for the introduction of computer-based media. And in this context, to some extent, various materials have been developed. So, in professional development, it's a bit better, but I conclude that professional development is one of the key factors for successful development of digital literacy. And even though there are a lot of activities going on in Germany, there still need to be much more to be done.
So in Germany, it seems that the decentralized approach to professional development for existing teachers may or may not be having the outcomes that we seek. Let's take a look at the case of professional development status in Brazil. Carla?
Being a teacher in Brazil is challenging. Nobody cares much about teachers. Teachers do not make money. Teachers work a lot. So, as in Germany, Brazil, the teachers' education programs are not sufficient, are not enough to develop good teachers and teachers that really can use technology in the classroom. But the universities are really trying to do that, although some teachers just don't think it's important. But there is usually at education schools and applied linguistics teachers, they are really concerned about helping the students develop digital literacy. And they offer courses for teachers and in service. And so, but the thing is, we have the courses at the university.
Uh-oh, what happened there? Did you freeze? One of the things that's fascinating us, Carla,
is very challenging.
Got it. So one thing that's fascinating about that,
what happens is that they get out of the university.
There's a gap here. There's a lag here. So Carla, we're going to conclude on that. One thing that you are pointing out is that there's money in Brazil for buying equipment, but there's not money for training teachers. So that's a familiar paradox. So we'll turn to the fifth key idea, the idea that higher education should play a more active role in providing professional development who are now schools. Who's going to talk about that?
Yeah, that's me. So I think that higher education could play an active role in providing professional development for in-service educators. And in future research, the focus needs to be on the development of, for example, deductive or inductive, derived and empirically verified structural model of pedagogical media literacy skills of teachers, so that we basically can identify which pedagogical skills the teachers need to have. And furthermore, we need to develop and validate an appropriate research instrument for empirical evaluations of teacher trainings. I'd say this could be very helpful, and we recently started such an effort in a joint research project of 4 universities and research institutions funded by the Federal Ministry of Education. So I think this could be a little step where the higher education could play an active role. But for a comprehensive approach to develop digital literacy across the lifespan, we basically need a lot more. We needed a national framework, we needed compulsory professional development programs, and furthermore, a much stronger collaboration of all educational institutions, basically from kindergarten and schools to university and vocational training. And I think improving communication between these institutions is a lot of work, and there needs a lot to be done. But I guess this is one of the key factors, to have a network of these institutions, so to get some synergies between them.
Thank you very much for that important point. Jonathan?
A case in Israel, it's interesting. First of all, can you close the microphone, because we have like thanks. So what? Still? Okay. The case in Israel is interesting because 5 years ago there was a big reform that forced teachers to take professional development. So, and with collaboration with the higher education, there's a lot of initiatives and a lot of different ways that teachers can have the professional development. The problem is that it varies so much that you can take like martial arts as a professional development, you can take a cooking course or something like that. So it doesn't need to be aligned specifically with your subject matter or even a pedagogical kind of approach. It can be like you take some course that has been approved to be professional development, and it's part of your professional development. Another challenge of this program was that I can hear myself.
Makes it very difficult.
Is that what happened is that there is no connection always between what the higher education is giving as professional development with what actually happens in the classroom. So teachers are coming, getting this professional development, amazing ideas, but then when they're coming to their classroom, they're like, how can I apply that? Where can I get this support? And it's very detached from what actually happens in their classroom. So we have 15 more minutes.
Got it. So now it's time for discussion and questions. We've just tried to synthesize our understanding of digital and media literacy in 6 countries and come to understand 5 major obstacles and opportunities. The first, the structural inequalities in education. Second, the locus of control over curriculum at the national or local level. Third, the relationship between, or the interface between higher education and K-12 education when it comes to digital and media literacy. Fourth, the status, the low status of continuing education for teachers. And fifth, the opportunity for higher education to support the continuing education needs of teachers. So now it's time for you in the audience to reflect on those 5 themes with us, add your insights and observations from where you sit or stand and what your research and teaching interests are, and to ask questions.
At the beginning of the session, you proposed to define the concept of diversity.
We didn't. Go back to that slide. Why didn't we do that? Partly because we experienced a lot of divergence around that. Take a look at this this set of ideas that we came up with as our sort of first stab at it. In Turkey, there's a big focus on recognizing differences between different types of media messages and different genres and different forms, recognizing the difference between an op-ed and a news story, or between a soap opera and a documentary. In Russia, there's a major focus on understanding authorship, recognizing purpose and point of view. In Brazil, there's a focus on essentially reading fluency, reading comprehension, and being able to be a critical reader online. In Germany, a major focus is on learning to create and share messages in a variety of forms, so that focus on media composition. In Israel, the focus on social responsibility and being a the most dominant way that media literacy comes into the K-12 curriculum is called read the book, then watch the movie. What we do, and pretty much the only thing that we can say is uniformly something every American kid is going to get at some point in their K-12 experience, is a cross-media comparison activity, where they actually get to see something like literary adaptation across media. So that's some examples by way of saying digital literacy is a contested term. It probably represents an expansion of the concept of literacy so that it incorporates elements of visual literacy, information literacy, media literacy, computer literacy, news literacy, and now. I think that's pretty much all we can say about that. What are your thoughts on the definition of digital literacy as it applies to your work or your interests? Or what other questions do you have? Panel members, I invite you to ask each other questions. Here's a question.
My question is, different countries have different school systems and also has a different influence from the media and shaping the school systems. What about, for individuals, or for a group of individuals, they have a background or have experience in one school system and then cross culture to another school system? What are the challenges for this?
That is a really, really interesting question. One thing that needs to be done, we didn't do it with this project, but what we need to better understand is how the discourses of protection and empowerment shape values issues in these cultural contexts, because that will inflect what digital literacy curriculum look like. So if in Russia they are afraid of Western media influence, right, as it sends terrible messages about Mr. Putin, and if in Turkey they're concerned about Twitter being used for political interaction, it's likely that the media literacy, the approaches to digital and media literacy are going to be inflected by those empowerment and or protectionist frames. We didn't explore that in this study, but that could be studied, and it's likely that for people who are crossing from one cultural context to another, it could be quite startling. And I know, Sait, that you have had some experience with that as you've spent your year in the United States watching the political conflagration in Turkey and making some observations about your own education system and media system from a little more distant perspective. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. I use our media literacy curriculum is focused on analyze the media text, because our country we used a lot of American and other Western countries media text, watching in the all evening, all night, in the all home, and maybe our curriculum is fear the Westernization and Americanization, and focus to what's the message. But in my opinion, our Twitter protectionism is not about the Americanization and Westernization. It's about our people and our people ideas is very fast spring in the Twitter and YouTube, and maybe the government protect some political movement in Turkey.
I actually think it is, and so that's fascinating. If people in Turkey are watching American TV all night at home, then what kind of media literacy is going to work there? But you also made an interesting observation earlier about some of the structural factors going on in Turkey, with most teachers being under the age of 30. This is a very young country with a large proportion of young people. Then many of the teachers in Turkish schools are going to be familiar with digital tools just because they grew up with them. And that's really different from in the United States, where the average teacher is 55 years old. She will be teaching for another 10 years before she retires, and may not be as closely connected to understanding the lived experience of the children and adolescents that they spend time with. Other comments, questions that you have as we move to the finish line?
What research said really people actually. And I was wondering if you could experience about best practice, the success story, but whether there's plenty of.
Right. Right. I'm going to repeat that question for the sake of our panel members who are watching remote. Very interesting observation about the disconnects between the research that's needed in digital and media literacy and the interests and alignments of the stakeholder groups who that are relevant for this work. And what are some examples of best practices that improve the interface between the research community and the stakeholder groups? Great question. Thoughts on that?
I can say that in Israel there is a department that it's called not media literacy, but it's the communication and film department, which is, if you take it together, it's the media literacy curriculum and who is in charge. And there is a lot of initiatives to try to implement, and 500 high schools are doing this kind of elective in film or communication out of, I think, a little bit less than 1,000 high schools in Israel. So there is a push, but on the other hand, since it's elective, it's not a compulsory kind of requirement for the curriculum. And there are some companies, and that's the threat as well, that wants to implement a media literacy in their point of view of curriculum, trying in the elementary level to say, oh, that's a cool curriculum, but then educator and researcher, I'm saying, oh, they're lacking of those kind of components as well. And so there are a lot of initiatives to do media literacy in Israel, and it's very developed. And there is also teacher pre-service teacher training for media literacy teachers. So there is this profession in Israel as in other countries as well. But again, there is those challenges of implementation with the administration that doesn't understand always what does that mean, media literacy, why to do that. Like my principal once time told me, why do I need to spend so much money on cameras as an equipment? What the kids are getting out of it? And I was laying out what are the outcomes, and they said, okay, I can see the advantage of it.
One of the reasons for the gap that exists between research and stakeholder groups has to do with the disciplinary structures that exist in universities. Media studies or communication scholars with interest in education can often be marginalized within the context of their department and their identities. Scholars of education, these are the members speaking to us remote, scholars of education with deep interest in media can often be marginalized within their departments of education and find it difficult to gain the political and the traction that they need in terms of moving forward. So one of the ways we're experimenting with that, and this you can move to the next slide, is we're actually trying to figure out what kind of learning community can we create that explicitly brings together college faculty, K-12 faculty, researchers, and media professionals. Oh, and librarians. Librarians are a huge stakeholder group that could be a much more fully bridging the disciplinary gaps that exist. So you have, I think, at your seat, example of the Summer Institute in Digital Literacy that we're running July 13th through 18th. This is kicking off a 12-credit graduate certificate program in digital literacy. We're doing empirical measures of attitudes, motivations, and behavior change that result from participating in this program. Finding that about 70% of the teachers who participated in last year's program identified the cross-stakeholder group conversation as the most meaningful feature of their learning experience and considered it to be very valuable. So the college faculty found it valuable to interface with the elementary and secondary educators. The librarians found it valuable to intersect with the researchers. The researchers found it valuable to intersect with the media professionals. So we wonder, we don't know yet, but we wonder if cross-stakeholder group professional development, rather than siloed up, here's something for elementary teachers, here's something for middle school teachers, maybe we can create the kind of innovation we need by bringing the stakeholder groups together. It relates to a point, Silke, that you made in your presentation about how improving the communication between higher ed and K-12 was an important goal in Germany.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I try to do the same here. Yeah, but yeah.
So other comments before we move to conclusion?
1 minute, yeah.
All right, we thank you very much for coming to this session in digital literacy, looking at cross-national perspectives in 6 countries. I'd like to thank Dr. Silke Grafe, Dr. Sait Tuzel, Dr. Carla Coscareli, Jonathan Friesem, and Elizaveta Friesem. And I'd like to thank you, the divisional members, instructional division members, and others who have joined us for this session. Thanks very much for coming.